Welcome. We're going to be talking today about who gets into our country, which is a big topic, obviously, in Washington, and it has a lot to do with how we define who we actually are. And part of the definition of who we are is sort of where we've come from, where our grandparents and parents and great-grandparents have come from. And I want you to do this sort of mental issue for yourself, mental kind of question. How many generations back do you consider yourself a quote-unquote American? I got here, well, I didn't get here quite on my own. Obviously, my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents came over from the old country. Most of us are immigrants. Some of us, in terms of our ancestors, came over involuntarily on slave ships. Some of us, in terms of our ancestors, were here from the beginning, or at least from recorded time in terms of being Native Americans. We're not all immigrants, but the only people who really have standing to complain about immigrants are Native Americans. Hello? But here's, I just want to start with your own history, and just find out from you. I'm an American citizen and was born outside the United States. And if you could, let me just limit this to people who you are American citizens. I want to come back to you who are not American citizens, but let's just limit this to American citizens. I'm a first-generation American, or I'm an American citizen, was born in the United States, but at least one of my parents was born outside the United States, or I don't fit into either category. So again, just American citizens, go. And we will see, you can do exactly the same thing. I mean, just think back, or at least investigate how many generations back were you essentially an immigrant. And let's look at where you are, where you came from. How many of you are, let's stop there, stop the bidding, and take a look. Okay, it turns out that 14% of you were born outside the United States. 47% of you are second generation. That is, one of your parents was born outside the United States. And that means that more than half of you are first or second generation Americans, those of you who are citizens. That's fairly high. That's one of the reasons that I am very proud to be here at the University of California, Berkeley, because this is, in fact, the whole California system is an engine of upward mobility. And it's an engine of opportunity for a lot of immigrants, for generations and generations. Now, I'd like to ask those of you, actually, this is interesting. This is what the United States looks like in terms of starting in 1900, going up to 2065 in terms of projections. Here we are right now. First and second generation. Here's the first generation, people who came over here, and then how many people were, percentage-wise, second generation. What you can see is an interesting graph that resembles our suspension bridge, which raises the question. I mean, we had in the 1960s through 1980s a relatively smaller percentage of first and second generation Americans, and then we went back up again to where we were at the turn of the last century. Raises questions about inequality. Was inequality, I mean, did immigration, all this immigration, generate the high degrees of inequality we had then and the high degrees of inequality we have now? Or was it the opposite way? Or is it the opposite way? That high degrees of inequality generated a lot of restrictions on immigration starting around here and have generated even more restrictions on immigration more recently. Keep that question in mind, because I want to come back to it. You understand the question? You understand the question. That is, high degrees of inequality at the start of the last century and now might have either been the result or the consequence of a lot of immigration. Let's take a look. Oh, non-citizens. I'd like non-citizens here, just non-citizens, if you could respond. And again, this is confidential. You don't have to respond if you don't want to. This is confidential. I'm temporarily in the United States on a student visa. I'm temporarily in the United States on another kind of visa. I have a green card that allows me to permanently live and work in the United States. I am not authorized to be in the United States, DACA or other. Go. And we will come back. You can do exactly the same thing. Some of you may not be United States citizens. Many of you may be on green cards. Some of you may be DACA dreamers. And let's end the bidding there, and let's just have a look. So most of you non-citizens are temporarily in the United States on a student visa. That's about 70 of you. Some of you are temporarily here on another kind of visa. About 21%, about 19% of you, 21 are on a green card. There's also, I am not authorized. 11 of you are DACA students. Now, this has been a huge issue. And every year I meet with all of the DACA students. These are students who are here at the University of California. And DACA, as you know, stands for a program that essentially allows people who came over to the United States, came into the United States as kids, to stay here and get work permits and so forth, and get education and be here without worrying about being picked up and deported. But some of you in this audience are DACA students, and every year I meet with the DACA students at Berkeley, and for the last few years, and I find it, and I don't want to use this class or even my time with you to stand on a soapbox and tell you what I think should be our policy in this country, but frankly, I think it is immoral what we are doing now, not allowing DACA students to have a pathway to citizenship and subjected them to the possibility of being deported. That's my view. That's just my view. That's my view. Don't know. This class is not for my views, but sometimes I just can't help myself. But let me just should there be, in your view, should there be any limit on how many people can become American citizens? No. There should be no limits on immigration. Anyone who wants to live here and work here and become a citizen should be able to do so. B, yes, immigration should be limited. Let's do this. What do you think? Go. And you, too, you may think that there should be no limit on immigration. I mean, we don't actually talk that way in this country any longer, but there was a time when we did. Okay, let's look and see what you think. A, no. So, actually, by a small majority, most of you think that there should be no limits on who can come to the United States and be a citizen. Now, historically, that was the case for a very long time in the United States. And certainly that was the case when my great-grandparents came over here. There was no limit. They came over here. I want to just emphasize, and you might kind of do some inquiries into your ancestry as well. My great-grandparents came over here partly because they wanted to make a new life for themselves and were ambitious, and they thought American streets were paved with gold. But primarily, they came over here because if they stayed where they were going to be killed. So there were that was the major motivation. But assuming that we have to limit immigration, and many of you say we shouldn't, but assuming we do have to limit immigration, then the question is, what should the criteria be? What should we be looking for? The percentage of U.S. population born abroad and legislation and executive actions. We can see here, starting in 1850, that we had each of these little dots represents a change in the immigration laws over the criteria. What should be the criteria for being here? This is one of the first acts of Congress of the United States, and it said, Section 1, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled that any alien being a free white person who shall have resided within the limits of and jurisdiction of the United States for the term of 2 years may be admitted to the United States. So it wasn't anybody. It was anybody who was a free white person. Let's keep that in mind. This is George Washington, president. John Adams, vice president. This is our history. Other major legal actions in 1870s, we banned criminals, polygamists, anarchists, and importers of prostitutes. Well, I think we were very clear about our criteria in those days. We were very choosy, let's put it that way. You might think about this question too. Who should be allowed in? In 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act. Now, what happened there is we had a lot of laborers from China who had been building the Transcontinental Railroad, and we built the railroad, and then a lot of them stayed, and a lot of people who were native-born felt, well, wait a minute, these Chinese, they're taking our jobs away. Have you heard that before? And so in 1882, Congress passed a law that said to the Chinese, no, you can't come here, and many of you are excluded. In 1921 and 1924, we put on quotas of nationality. Each nation had a certain quota of numbers of people that could come from that nation, and it was dependent on the percentage of people from that country who came to the United States in 1890. Now, what I want to suggest to you and you is that that quota system was essentially designed to avoid a lot of the Eastern Europeans who were flooding Ellis Island and who came after 1890. So they wanted to put a cap on all of these Eastern European type people. And then in 1965, the Immigration Nationality Act, the principle there was family reunification. In 1965, Congress decided you could come to America if you were part of a family who are already here, if you were a spouse or you were a direct, close relative. It was thought of as a humanitarian idea. Right now, you have certain people in Washington calling this not family reunification, but chain migration. That's the new term being used. But this was a humanitarian idea. What a lot of the framers and people who came up with the family reunification idea forgot about. They didn't think about. Maybe they thought about, but they actually didn't see the consequence, is that poor families tend to have more children. Poverty and more children, because you need more children to tend the farm. They tend to be, or a lot of children, some children die off. If you're poor around the world, you tend to have bigger families. So that family reunification provision tended to mean more people came over who were poor. Now, you always had a lot of poor people coming, but you had a lot of poor people coming who were also from Latin America and also from Southern Asia and some even from Africa. And that created some unease, shall we say. In 1986, millions of unauthorized immigrants were legalized and sanctions were placed on employers who hired unauthorized people. And then in 2012 and 2014, deferred action for childhood arrivals. So what is the basic choice here? What is the fundamental choice? I want to just end on this because we started with a question of who should get in. A little bit more than half of you said anybody should get in, but if there are going to be any limits on who gets into the United States, what's the fundamental question here? What's the fundamental value question? Well, choice A is give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. That's Emma Lazarus's poem. is affixed to the Statue of Liberty. She wrote it in the 1880s. It became affixed to the Statue of Liberty in the early part of the 20th century, first years of the 20th century, but that represented a certain philosophy. The idea was America was the last refuge, but a lot of these people would make huge contributions because they were ambitious, they cared about this country, and they were desperate. But there may be a new philosophy, and let me just provide that. Forget you're tired and you're poor. Give us your richest and your highest skilled, yearning to make even more. For $1 million floor, they can buy the golden door. Well, that's my poem. It's not really very good. But it represents a very different philosophy. That is, we are not open to the neediest around the world or those who will appreciate the possibilities here. We are open to people who already have skills, who already have money. When you hear merit, the word merit in terms of immigration, that word is a loaded term. Who has merit? Is it people who are very ambitious and very needy? Or is it people who have a lot of money and a lot of skills? Behind everything that's going on in Congress, behind everything that's going on in the immigration debate in the United States, lies these two fundamental philosophies. And what we do eventually will depend on you and on you. Thank you.